What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Jerichoholic8704, here to give you another installment of my little Wrestling Shower Thoughts playlist. And this one was brought to you by Tyler Overstreet on my comment on wrestling and geek culture. And his topic was about John Cena and the infamous John Cena heel turn. When I say infamous, I mean completely non-existent, because he hasn't turned heel pretty much since he became the biggest babyface in the company. Now, in terms of a John Cena heel turn, I'm of the belief that it's just never going to happen. And I mean, it's kind of easy to think that, considering he's pretty much semi-retired now. And at this point, he's become such a pop culture icon. And when I say pop culture icon, I mean, that kind of sounds a little, he's definitely, he's nowhere near The Rock's level, but, he's starting to get a little mainstream exposure. He's kind of just going to become a babyface for life, if that makes sense. I mean, he already was, but it's almost confirmed now. And, one of the arguments I always hear is, oh, well, John Cena, he's a babyface, sure, but the crowd turns him heel, the crowd boos him and stuff like that. And to me, that was never really a valid argument on why they never turned John Cena. Because, sure, John Cena did get boos, and, whoever faced him at some point was just an instant babyface, yeah. But John Cena was never a heel. Because, at the end of the day, John Cena still acted like a babyface. And, he never got, he always made the comeback. He always had the babyface comeback. He always had the babyface promo. He always came out smiling. He was always hugging kids and shit like that. He was never a heel. Sure, people hated him. But, I mean, look at, Rocky Maivia. When Rocky Maivia first started out, sure, he was a babyface and everyone hated him, but he wasn't a heel because he was just the white meat babyface. He did everything a classic babyface is supposed to do. So, to me, it's really a invalid argument to say that WWE did all they could in turning John Cena heel because they just ran with the boos. To me, fans were just booing the staleness. They weren't booing his character. I mean, they were in a sense, but they weren't booing the actions of his character. They were booing the staleness and the horribleness of his character. They weren't booing the actions. It's if, for example, think Joffrey Baratheon from Game of Thrones, who was just totally unlikable. It's one of the worst characters of all time in a good way. He was a good character because you hated him because of his actions. You didn't hate the actor. He was a good actor. He was a great actor on the show. You didn't hate him. You hated the character, Joffrey Baratheon. But with John Cena, people hated the idea behind his character. People were booing that. They weren't booing the character itself. So, I mean, what was John Cena's character? He was just a happy-go-lucky guy who didn't give a fuck about anything because he would lose a title, he'd get screwed over in a match, and the next day on Raw, he'd be coming out making fart jokes. So, in terms of a John Cena heel turn, I think at one point, it was too late to turn him heel. And I think around the time of, maybe around 2011, 2012, is when they really missed their boat on the John Cena heel turn. And I think it became more, they had a little chance to salvage it at WrestleMania 29, where he could have turned on The Rock, but he didn't. And to me, that was the last chance, but to me, the writing was already on the wall at that point. At that point, it was too late to go back. They had already committed to him as a babyface for life. Before then, I would even say 2010. By that point, he was pretty much babyface for life. Not to mention, at this point, John Cena's kind of found himself, if that makes sense. He's found out the type of match he has to have to get a reaction. He's kind of found, he's a little bit smarter now with the crowds and everything. He kind of knows how to read the crowd a little better than he did when he was younger in the mid 2000s. So he's kind of built up a little bit of a better reputation with the fans, especially in the last couple of years when he really started having great matches. To me, the biggest turnaround for Cena, for me personally, the turnaround for Cena was post Money in the Bank 2011, after he really started having good matches with CM Punk. And then a bigger turnaround came in 2015 when he started the US Open Challenge, and he really started having great matches on a consistent basis. So I think because he's building up such a good reputation with not only casual fans, but with hardcore fans as a whole, who really look for match quality as a definitive factor in determining who's a good wrestler or not, he's built up a better reputation than what he did. The matches he had in the mid and late 2000s really weren't a lot to, write home about. I mean, granted, he had some really great matches with Shawn Michaels and stuff like that, but, that's Shawn Michaels we're talking about. So when you look back on, when John Cena should have turned heel, fans have obviously been clamoring for it for years, but the thing about it is the problem wasn't, I don't think John Cena couldn't have been a good heel. I think he could have been a great heel. And I think a heel turn was really necessary for John Cena early on in his career. So he built up a better reputation with the fans. Because let's be real, a lot of the hate for John Cena stems from his time on top in the years '06 through 2010. Just because it was all him and nothing else. And the reason it was all him and nothing else was because WWE didn't have a lot of baby faces. The only other baby faces were part-timers. Like Undertaker and Shawn Michaels were the first people I thought of when thinking of like, all right, if John Cena were to turn heel, who would be the best baby faces to work with him? And Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker were the first two to come to mind, but by '07, Shawn Michaels was part-time, and by, maybe 2009, 2010, Undertaker was part-time. So the only other person I was thinking was maybe Batista. Batista could have been pushed as a babyface, but on the heel side, you had Edge, you had Randy Orton, and the only other person I thought of as a babyface was Jeff Hardy. And the problem was they were very stop and start with Jeff Hardy, and the thing is Jeff Hardy also had personal issues, so he was kind of a liability. And, you had CM Punk you could have pushed as a top babyface. So I think in terms of a heel turn, your best bet, in my opinion, probably would have been 2007, early 2007, when he faced Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 23. Shawn Michaels is obviously a great babyface, especially in his second run. So I think if you go into that match with John Cena as a heel against Shawn Michaels, I know they were tag team champions going into that WrestleMania 23 main event. So maybe, a month prior, he loses. He costs Shawn Michaels the tag team championships and he turns on him and stuff like that. And, Shawn Michaels has the emotional ride of, he lost Triple H because Triple H got the legit injury. So he was on his own. He was the one-man DX band. And you could have exploited that to give Shawn Michaels a lot of sympathy, and people could, start to boo John Cena as a result. So with John Cena beating Shawn Michaels, the part-time babyface, that raises his stock as a heel. You have a heel victorious in the main event, which is something we don't see very often. And in terms of a full-time babyface, I think the person you have to look to is, at least in that time, in 2007, is CM Punk. Because, remember Survivor Series 2006, you had that Survivor Series team consisting of the Hardy Boys, D-Generation X, and CM Punk, and the crowd was cheering for CM Punk. And it wasn't like he was just some indie darling and all the smart fans were cheering for him. He was getting good reactions. So I think you could have drafted CM Punk to Raw. You could have had CM Punk win the Money in the Bank match at WrestleMania 23. Now, I know he would go on to win it at 24 and 25, but let's be real. Mr. Kennedy was the winner at WrestleMania 23, and that experiment never really went anywhere. So, with the power of hindsight, you can put an ixnay on the whole Mr. Kennedy experiment, considering it's not going to go anywhere. And you could give CM Punk the briefcase, and you could make CM Punk your new top babyface on Raw. And you could have Batista as the top babyface on SmackDown. And again, you can start building up Jeff Hardy, because, he was getting great reactions too. You could start building him up as a new top babyface. So you could enter in, 2008, 2009 with your top heels being, John Cena, Randy Orton, Edge, and you can have your top baby faces being, Batista, CM Punk, and Jeff Hardy, and you had Chris Jericho coming back. He was another top heel, and then you had part-timers like Undertaker and Shawn Michaels who would come back to be big baby faces when you needed them. Another option, I guess, was Bobby Lashley, but again, with the power of hindsight, that experiment was really going nowhere. They could have pushed him as a top baby face, and I know Vince McMahon would have loved to do that. And they probably would have tried, and it might have worked, it might not have worked. But the thing about CM Punk is the feud with CM Punk and John Cena in 2011 is what, put Cena on the map as, a big-time main eventer in the eyes of the fans. He had been for years, but it was when the fans really started taking John Cena seriously was after that match with CM Punk at Money in the Bank. And who knows? If they had given CM Punk the ball in 2007, he could have ran with it. Maybe CM Punk would still be employed by WWE because he wouldn't have quit, because he would have felt like he was being used properly. So I think maybe giving CM Punk that opportunity early and giving him the Money in the Bank contract, and you could have had CM Punk cash it in honorably. Maybe at like SummerSlam 2007, he could have cashed it in the main event against John Cena, just saying one-on-one, like, I want you in the main event of SummerSlam, just, months prior. And John Cena could just bury him and be like, you're a fucking indie geek, you're skinny, you're just a loser, what have you done? I'm a millionaire, you're nothing. So I think, exploiting the fact that the company was behind John Cena, because everyone knew that, and that was the main reason people didn't like him, aside from the fact that, his matches weren't super great in the early portions of his career. It was because the company was behind him, and we all knew it, and they weren't, going to change anything about it. This was their guy, and they were pushing him. It was almost like the crowd versus, the company, which has been the case for years, in the past couple of years, I should say, with the whole Daniel Bryan thing and stuff like that. And I mean, by the time fans really started to appreciate John Cena, I mean, he would have had some great guys to work with, like Shawn Michaels and CM Punk and Jeff Hardy and Undertaker. If you put him in the ring with those guys, he's going to have great matches, and then people can start, maybe Cena can start learning that type of match he needed to have earlier on in his career, as opposed to the latter portions of his career when he started learning how to have really, really great matches. So to me, I think that was the prime time to do it, because you needed to do it early on in his career, so the fans can kind of get their palate cleansed of John Cena before he became the big top babyface, similar to how Rock had to turn heel before he became one of the biggest babyfaces in the company. So that's it for me. My name is Jerichoholic8704, and I will see all of you guys later.